There we go. Okay. Let me share my screen again. Perfect. Oops. Okay, so like I said, we're going over the importance of self-care. So we'll talk about self-care. We've talked a little bit about self-care in previous sessions, but we'll go a little bit deeper into that today. Joyful movement, again, we've kind of gone over this just a little bit in previous sessions, but we will go a little bit more in depth in that. We'll talk about goal setting and how to set goals that you feel ready for, that you feel challenged but not overwhelmed. And then also eating on the go. So let me see if I can, let's see. Okay. So as always, if you have any questions, you want to add to the discussion, you have any concerns, whatever it is, just either send a chat or just blurt it out and we can have that discussion based on some of the things that you guys are thinking. So going off of this, first, I guess, actually, before we go into this first question, what are some positives that you guys have been working on, maybe off of your goal sheets that you've been writing down, or just in general? Talk to me about some positives that you've seen in the last couple weeks or last few weeks that you would like to share with everyone, either in the chat or you can just blurt it out, like I said. Let's try to get at least 2 positives before we move on with the presentation. I think we got a chat. Mindful eating. Yes. So that was the like the topic of our presentation last week. So who else feels like they've made progress with mindful eating? So I got another mindful. So just being more mindful in general, which is awesome. So anyone else have any comments on mindful eating and how they've really worked on that or been a little bit more aware of that? I'm getting a lot of good ones now. So noticing, so hunger, type of hunger, level of hunger, we talked about that last week. I think the biggest thing is noticing hunger and the type of hunger without that judgment piece, because again, it's just information for us, right? Planning snacks. So that is always super helpful. I think planning is such an important piece. And I think it's our last session that we'll go over planning a little bit more detail. So awesome. Monitoring sleep. So making an intentional effort to get a good night's rest at least 2 times a week. I love that goal. We'll talk about that. That's kind of a short-term goal of, a bigger goal, getting bigger or better sleep overall. I love that. Awesome. Thank you guys for sharing. Anyone else before I move on? Going once, going twice. Okay. All right. So let's hop in. So another question. What does self-care mean to you guys? And since we've talked about this a little bit over the last few weeks, maybe how has your idea of self-care changed? Do you feel like you've made improvements? Maybe it's just setting aside time. How is self-care or your view of self-care changed since maybe before this class? So talk to me about self-care. What do you think? Or what are your reservations about self-care even? What do you guys think? Anyone? Sometimes I get a lot that self-care feels selfish or even not productive, or a common one is how the heck do we have time for self-care? We have so many other things. How do we find time just for us, right? Especially some of you, like, all of you work, parents, right? So there's a lot of things going on in our lives. So someone said, it means taking time to do something that brings you joy. I love that, right? So really focusing on what is something that you can do for yourself, which is really hard. Anyone else want to share a little bit about self-care? Got another one. Taking a lunch break. Yes. I think that's such a good one. That's such a hard one, because going back to sometimes we think we don't feel productive when we take those breaks, because we're like automatically thinking about 17 other things we could be doing. But sometimes we forget how helpful taking those breaks is for our stress level, our health, just in general. Not pushing myself more than I have energy for. Yeah, that's a big one. So really like setting boundaries with yourself, and just not pushing yourself, sometimes saying no, which can be really hard too. Good ones. Okay. Okay, so self-care is and self-care is not. So a couple of the points on the left, self-care is something that we need to be consistent with, right? Find some sort of consistency. And of course, a short-term goal, like someone said earlier, their goal was trying to have a good night's rest 2 nights a week, right? Of course, we want to increase that, but that's a great start, right? So that might be the consistency we start with, and then we move forward with that. Different for everyone, right? So just because someone likes to meditate does not mean that you have to meditate. Just because someone likes taking baths does not mean that you have to like taking baths, right? So there's different forms of self-care for every person. Also, a big one that I talk a lot about is it may change on a day-to-day basis, right? Sometimes it might look like brushing your teeth and showering, right? Those are more of the basic self-care things, of course, but sometimes that's what you can do and that's what you have time for. And sometimes it might look like, going to get a massage, right? Or going for a walk. So it can be different based on what's going on in your day and what you're going through, right? So something to be mindful of there. And then self-care is not, like I said, I get a common feeling or emotion from people that feel selfish. I get this a lot from moms too. They feel like they have to give, but sometimes we have to take that breath in and give to ourselves so we can give more to others, right? A practice that needs to take a large amount of time. So again, I sometimes start with 5 minutes a day with my patients, right? Just doing something, whether that's just even doing nothing, can be self-care, right? Like just sitting in your car maybe, or just sitting in your room in a quiet space. Just starting small can really pay off. Okay, any questions here about self-care just in general? Move this. So a few examples of self-care. So physical activity, making time for personal appointments. I think this is a big one too. Making sure that you make those doctor's appointments, maybe counseling appointments, therapy appointments, whatever that looks like for you. Sleep, we've talked about sleeps before. Saying no to events on occasion. So someone already kind of talked about that one a little bit, right? Like making sure you're not pushing yourself too far, right? You're only one person. And sometimes saying no or setting boundaries really pays off for you. And again, it's not selfish to say no or that you can't do something. You're just being honest with yourself and with the other person. Adequately nourishing the body, taking the first 15 minutes of the day to focus on yourself. So again, 15 minutes, making time for this meeting. Yes, I love that. So that's a perfect start there. So yeah, taking the first 15 minutes of the day to only focus on yourself. Again, it can be 5 minutes, right? Whatever that looks like for you. Reading or journaling, and then practicing self-compassion, which we are going to talk about. I think that's the next slide. We're going to talk about self-compassion in a second. So when you hear self-compassion, what do you guys think about? Because it's not an easy thing by any means. And I think it's an interesting thing. So when you hear self-compassion, do you feel like it's difficult for you? Do you feel like, what do you hear? What do you think whenever I say self-compassion? Chat, let me see. I love it. Yes, exactly. So someone said treating yourself like you would a friend. And the other person said being as gentle with yourself as you are with others. Everyone's saying that. I love that, right? I think that's always the first example I use is how, if you were going through this specific problem, say it's with food, right? Since we're doing a nutrition class, right? Say you're having a problem with food. How would you respond to your friend or a loved one? And how would you respond to yourself? And for some reason, we always respond to us, not always, but often we respond to ourselves in a much harsher way, right? And why is that? Why do you think that is? Anyone care to share, like how, if they've done any self-compassion work, or what do you feel is harder about that for you? Then maybe you would say something to a friend. What do you guys think? Why do you think it's harder to be compassionate toward yourself? Or why do you think it's easier to be compassionate toward a friend? Maybe.
Yeah, the reason I really don't know, I think it's just the way we are. So it's easier to do something really to the others than to us.
Yes, yes. So it's like something that we've internalized over and over, even, right? Like we get used to treating ourselves that way, right? Or we get used to like a response, right? We do something and then we have this like repeated response that we have, right? And so being compassionate toward ourselves feels weird, feels different, feels foreign because it is, right? We don't have a lot of experience being nice to ourselves in these specific moments. And that feels weird and it feels uncomfortable. But the thing is just because we feel uncomfortable doesn't mean it's bad, right? And so I think we've kind of talked about this maybe in previous sessions, but I'm going to say it again. We can't hate ourselves healthy, right? So there's a lot more room for growth and opportunity when we treat ourselves, or we're aware of certain things without judging ourselves for it. And we look at it like, okay, this happened, right? Why did this happen? And how can I work on, changing this or doing something different? Right? How can I seek support for this? And so that opens so many opportunities rather than just shaming yourself for what happened or speaking to yourself in a negative way, right? That kind of keeps you closed off and doesn't really help you grow in that moment. So we're always giving ourselves opportunities for different things and different options to take. And so I encourage you to think about that next time. If there is, see someone's in, sorry. Trying to treat yourself with compassion, or at least being neutral. That's always a good start too, instead of being negative, trying to be neutral. So self-compassion is understanding, being sensitive to, and caring for various situations that occur in your life. So it says here, instead of criticizing, practicing empathy and kindness, instead of isolating yourself, asking for help, which is a really hard one, but this is one really pays off, but very hard. Instead of overanalyzing, choose non-judgmental mindfulness. I'm going to give you guys a resource. So Kristin Neff, Dr. Kristin Neff, is basically an expert in self-compassion. And these are 3 of her books, but I will also give you her website in the chat after the class, but she does like certain, I'll send it to my coworker sometimes, but she'll do like daily motivation. Meditations for self-compassion, and she does a lot of good interactive work, and she has a lot of resources for self-compassion, just ways to practice it throughout the day. So I'll send this for you guys, but self-compassion is not an easy thing. It's just something that takes practice. So maybe give one or two of you give me an example or maybe a goal for how you can add a little bit of self-compassion or grace into your life. What do you think? What do you guys think? Where could you add a little bit of self-compassion or grace, or even patience? That can be self-compassion, right? How can you be patient with yourself? Let's see what's said.
I don't know, showing love and respect, taking care of yourself.
Yes, absolutely. So just having more respect for you. I think a lot of things we've said, like, just setting boundaries, talking to yourself in a loving way, right? Starting there. Good one. Anyone else want to say one more thing? That maybe they can work on as far as self-compassion goes, or patience. Okay, well, we will just stick with that one. I think that's a good one. And it's just looking at things, from a look or perspective of respect for yourself, right? Trying to be kind, trying to speak to yourself like you would a friend, like we said earlier. Or maybe one goal can just be checking out Dr. Neff's resources. That would be good. Okay, so we'll move on from like some of the things. We'll go more into the joyful movement part of it. And we've kind of talked about joyful movement. So this is kind of a check-in with you guys to see what maybe you have explored with joyful movement, but then still talk about ways that we can continue with increasing physical activity and just joyful movement in general. So I won't bore you with these things, but this slide just goes over those immediate results and long-term results for increasing activity. Okay, so again, we know some of these things, right? It improves our mood, our energy, our sleep. It helps prevent some of those chronic diseases, and also just keeps our bones and our muscles strong, right? So we kind of know some of those benefits from increasing movement, but how do we do that, right? So before I go into this, how have you guys over the last few weeks kind of explored the idea of joyful movement? What do you think? Has anyone done anything different? Has anyone like changed the way they look at exercise maybe? Like we've talked about how it doesn't have to be super intense, right? It can be more low intensity. And maybe you found more consistency with that. So talk to me about what you've noticed about maybe your relationship with exercise, how you view it. Have you tried anything new? What do you think?
This is Sherry. In our in our insurance coverage, there was a postcard that came in the mail, and it was called Hinge Health. And I looked at it. They had a free yoga mat, and they had all these things like a tablet. They had an app for different things to help in your health, your exercise, and different things. So I it said no cost. So I went ahead and ordered it, and the yoga mat came, and everything came. So now I'm going to try to implement that into my
Cool.
daily week.
Very cool. We love free.
I know.
Yes, that's awesome. I'll look into it. I wrote it down. I'm going to look into it, and I'll send that resource for everyone to have. But that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. I haven't heard of
You're
that one
welcome.
yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Alessandra. So for me, what I have been trying to do now that's not so hot as it was, is to take my dog for a walk,
Yes.
even like if it's 30 minutes, but take them for a walk.
Yes. So walking the dog, I think that's mutually beneficial. I love that. It's very like therapeutic. I think someone else said that too. So yep, after dinner walks. So taking the dogs after dinner. And someone said they got a puppy, which definitely brings some energy out of you. And again, we want to wear those puppies out. So that's a good one. So walking dogs is such a good way to add some exercise in. Anyone want to share maybe on how they've changed their view of exercise since we've been talking about the term joyful movement? And anything surprising about maybe it doesn't have to be super intense, or we want to look at it in different ways? Anyone practice there or thought differently? Going once. And maybe, we're still kind of working on that, and maybe you're there, maybe both, everyone's there. But just, let's see. Yeah. So someone said walking counts. And so like, even though, two things I want to comment on, because I just got another good message. So walking counts. I think I've said this, but walking to me is one of the most underrated forms of movement because it's easier to get in during the day. Usually you can find several points of the day that you can get it in, whether you're at work or home. And you can do things like walk around the mall, sometimes dangerous for the bank account. But you can still do those things, when like to increase steps, right? And it's easy to find consistency there. Someone said they like the idea and it sounds good, but there's fear of gaining weight if it isn't intense, or fear that might happen. So that is such a common fear and common thing that we hear all the time. So anyone else like kind of like resonate or relate to that a little bit? Do you feel like that's something that sits with you, that fear that it might not be intense enough for weight loss? Something it's something that whoever said that is not alone. We hear that all the time, and that's something that we have to kind of work out of people, because again, there's so much more research on it does not have to be intense. It's just more the consistency. It's finding something that you enjoy, finding something that you'll keep doing. And a lot of times, like, you can have a mix. Sometimes you might have a little bit heavier, but sometimes it might just be like the walking or something that's low intensity. So thanks for sharing that. I think that's, I mean, that's a challenge that we get all the time. Okay, so again, here's some more tips to make exercise more enjoyable. So trying something that you haven't tried before. I think that there's a lot of things that we don't know if we like or not, right? It could be swimming, it could be playing tennis, it could be, I think a very popular thing right now is pickleball. Something that, you've never tried before. Group activities or bringing a friend with you, wearing something that makes you feel comfortable and confident. You wouldn't believe how much this helps. Buying something that you like, that you feel good in, that always helps with motivation to getting a little bit more exercise in. Having a snack prior and after, right? So you have that energy. So you don't want to be like super stuffed, obviously, right? Because that'll make you feel super tired while you're exercising. You don't want to be digesting a big meal while you're exercising. But we also want to have enough energy, right? So if we haven't eaten in several hours, of course, we're not going to have a lot of energy to get an exercise in. Listening to music or maybe an audiobook or podcast. If I don't like the treadmill very much at all, but if I am ever on the treadmill, I have to have like a Netflix up or something on my phone. Otherwise, I'll be done in like 5 minutes. But having something there that kind of occupies or at least makes the time go faster is helpful. Anyone else have some tips that maybe have made it more enjoyable for you that you want to share, or things that you've found to help others in this group?
Well, one thing, Yuval says listen to music. So I try sometimes to do just one song. I try to jump in my trampoline. So I live here in the office and I put like a fun song that I enjoy. And yes. I try to jump in the trampoline, that whole song.
I love it. Trampoline is a great idea. I love that. Trampoline and dancing to a song, right? Like those are two really good ways to get more activity in your day. So love that idea. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Oh, chat. Let's see. Having a friend. So walking the track after school. So, and that might mean that you bring your clothes to work with you, or you just walk in your work clothes, right? So either one. Just comfy shoes would probably make it a little easier or more enjoyable. But yeah, bringing stuff so you're prepared, walking with a coworker after work or on the track. That's a great idea. Anyone else? Anyone have challenges when it comes to getting more exercise or joyful movement in their day that maybe we can talk about, and maybe other people are feeling those same challenges? Time. Yes. Anyone else? I'm sure everyone struggles with time.
I feel like I'm exhausted when I get home.
Okay.
Yeah, I work with special needs kids, so I'm lifting them all day, putting wheelchairs, moving, and it's a high school. So when I get home, usually I have a hard time.
Yes. Okay. So time and just feeling tired, and achiness. So even some like body aches even. So how do you feel? Have you ever done anything that helps with that? Or maybe anyone else on this call, how do you work around being tired or maybe just finding time when you feel like you can't? What has worked for other people before I share? So with time, remember that it doesn't have to be a super long time. right? I've heard some people will try to, and this is just an example, this might not relate to everyone, but when they take their kids to practice, walking around at practice while they're there, right? Or even just like, I know you guys all have to be at work like really early, probably, but like just doing it right after work, right? Like someone that just said they walk a couple laps around the track right after work, right? And then they go home. Another thing is just taking advantage of weekends first, right? Like just doing something for 5 to 10 minutes on the weekends and making an effort there. And then we can start to move into the weekday. And of course, don't forget there's a lot of other things sometimes that we have to work on before we work on exercise. So sometimes we have to think about that, right? Like if we're not getting enough sleep, we need to start there, right? Because of course we're going to be super tired by the end of the day. Or if we're not getting, we're super stressed out about something, we maybe need to focus on that first, right? And so there's other things that go into it. Yes, so someone said setting a goal for steps. I think that's always a good start, and being realistic about it. Everyone wants to do 10,000 when they come into my office, and that's so many steps. And some of these that, that walk around campus all day might just blow that out of the water. I know a lot of you are on your feet all day, but step goals are always a good start, because it's again, it's that active lifestyle versus the purposeful movement. We just want to increase that activity a little bit day by day. So that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so again, recommendation 150 minutes a week. However, we are working up to this. So, right, so we're about to go into goal setting. Let me do that first. Hold on. And we'll talk about something that's realistic for you and how to set goals. And this is the same thing when it comes to exercise, right? Being realistic. So it's a little bit of a challenge, but not something that's overwhelming, and not something that it needs to be sustainable, right? I think I've sent you guys this resource before once, but I wanted to mention it again. This is a workout plan that was put together by Abby Brown. She's another dietitian that we have, and also personal trainer. And it's a 3-day strength workout plan. I think it's meant to be something you do for like 6 weeks. And it's mostly body weight. I think maybe you can use dumbbells, but you can use body weight, and it's meant for like beginners, right? And you can still do it if you're a little bit more advanced in exercise, right? Like there's still a lot of good, just basic movements that I think are just as good, even if you're experienced in exercise. But this is something I'll send the link to. You can buy this, or you can purchase this directly on our website for, I think it's $19.99. So I'll resend the link for you guys if you're interested in that. Any questions before we move on? Okay. So let's talk about setting goals a little bit. Let's move into that. So typically, I'm sure you guys do this in other areas of your life, right? And you probably started with this group too, as far as health goals, but we want to have short-term goals, and we also want to have long-term goals, right? And something that's really important here is it has to be deeper than weight loss, right? Or changing our body. Because whenever we set a goal for weight loss, what does that really tell our brain, right? Like, how do we have something to focus on? We can't really, right? So we want to set more behavior change goals that really gives our mind something that we can direct energy toward and say, hey, I'm going to focus on this, and this will make me healthier and feel better. And weight loss might be a result, but it's not our primary goal, right? We want to feel better. Someone said respecting ourselves earlier, right? We want to respect ourselves, have that body respect. And we just want to, be healthier in general, and healthy behaviors equal health, right? So short-term goals, it's over here. So these goals are targets you want to achieve soon. And we'll talk about some examples in a second. And then there are long-term goals. So these are goals for the future. Both of these should be realistic, right? But we can still set goals that we, maybe it's pushing ourselves a little bit. But not something that's super, super difficult, or again, seems like you might not be able to sustain that. So here are some examples. I'm sure you guys have heard of SMART goals before. But what they are is it's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, relevant, and timely. Okay, and so let's go over these examples, and then maybe we'll go over some of you guys. So this one says, for the next 2 weeks, I will walk at least 3,000 steps each day by walking my dog at the end of the day. And it could have even been, for the next 2 weeks, I will walk at least 3,000 steps each day, right? Or it could have been 3,000 steps 4 times a week, right? Someone said one earlier, getting a certain amount of sleep 2 times a week, right? So that's a short-term SMART goal, because it is specific, it is measurable, it is achievable most of the time, right? Depending on who you are, relevant and timely. So anyone want to share a SMART goal or SMART short-term goal, maybe that they have been working on, or maybe they've written on their past sheets for the last couple weeks? What do you guys think? I'll give some more examples. Maybe I'll get one more from you guys.
So my short one would be the next month I'll be walk at least 8,000 steps
Great.
4 times per week.
Love it. I love that. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Remember, it can be for activity. It can be for, it can be for, I'll give you some examples for the nutrition section, right? Or it can be self-care, right? Sometimes it's, I'm going to give myself 5 minutes every morning, at least 3 times a week, right? For something that I like to do, self-care, right? Or I'm going to pack my lunch 4 times a week, right? Or 3 times. It can also be, we talked about, the consistency of eating. Maybe it's, I'm going to, eat breakfast every day, or something like that, right? So it can be in several different areas. Anyone want to share one SMART before we go into long term? Or sorry, one short term. Okay, so let's go into long term. So let me see. So this one says, in 8 months, I will be able to walk 3 miles without needing to take a break to rest. So that's an example. Okay, I keep moving this thing around. Sorry. So other things that I'm thinking are that I've seen in the past are, I want to run a 5K with my daughter or with my husband or my wife, right? Or, I want to decrease a certain lab level from your blood work, right? So maybe that's like an A1C or cholesterol levels, or blood pressure. So those are a few examples of, just that we don't have to share these necessarily, but these are some examples on how you can set goals. Again, that aren't weight loss goals. They're more just like general health, encouraging, empowering goals that you can get to here. Any questions or thoughts on goal setting before we move into on the go meals and snacks? Has anyone, or have you guys heard of SMART goals before? Are y'all pretty familiar with that? Some of you, maybe. Got a chat. No, cool. Okay. So yeah, it's kind of something to think about, right? It gives you something to give more energy toward, and it helps you kind of check in and say, how am I doing? How can I improve? And sometimes it's, what is the obstacle here? What's keeping me from reaching this goal? Right. And so in individual sessions with dietitians at Lamond, we spend a lot of time here, right? Like, what is keeping you from reaching this goal, and how can we improve that? How can we overcome that? Okay, someone shared one other goal. So it says lowering cholesterol, right? So that would be more of like that long-term goal. Great. Prepping meals for busy weeks, where it would be easier to like eat out. So kind of forecasting a little bit and saying, hey, it's going to be really busy. Maybe I need to, prepare or plan a little bit better coming up. That's an excellent goal. So you kind of provided the short-term goal to help you get to the long-term goal there. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Okay. So how many of you struggle with quick on the go meals? So I think I get a lot of people say that specifically breakfast is hard here because we're sometimes we're running out of the door. Maybe it's lunch because again, we don't have a long enough lunch break, or we have, we don't pack something to have for lunch. So this can be a really hard one when like time is an issue. Sometimes it's motivation too. Sometimes we don't want to cook. Someone said lunch is hard. Yeah. So, and the thing is sometimes we don't want to cook and that's okay. I think sometimes we have to give ourselves grace there that we don't have to chef meals up all the time. Right. So we're going to talk about some tips specifically for 4 different scenarios when it comes to quick on the go things. Yeah, someone else said lunch is hard. Yeah, lunch can be hard because you get in like the hustle and bustle of the day and it's hard to be prepared for that. So yeah. So first scenario is on the go. I cannot figure out where I want this. Okay. Let's see if this works. So breakfast, like I said, is often skipped due to rushing out of the door in the morning. So a couple tips here is preparing the night before. So this can also be for lunch too, right? So preparing the night before just to take, even if it's leftovers, I think sometimes it's so much easier to put it in a Tupperware, add a couple sides, and even in the lunchbox and put it in the fridge so you can just grab it. So that's just one less step you have to do in the morning. Keeping convenient items on hand. I have this conversation all the time. Convenient foods help make health sustainable, right? So having things on hand that are like easy to grab, or just like sometimes they're plan Bs, right? Whether that's for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, for snack, having things that are easy to grab and go help make this realistic for people. So for breakfast specifically, I love the Kodiak waffles. Those are the protein waffles. Protein bars, I think we've given some resources for different protein bars that you can have. Protein shakes, and then I like the Jimmy Dean Delight sandwiches. So they're like microwavable breakfast sandwiches that you can pop in the microwave, add a fruit to, and super quick. And then freeze smoothies. You can actually like prepare a smoothie, freeze it, and then thaw it the night before to have the next morning. So any on the go tips maybe that you guys have for each other for whenever you're kind of running out the door? Anyone want to share what worked well for you? Maybe not. So I encourage you to keep some of these things on hand, okay, or prepare the night before. I will actually share I know overnight oats isn't a new thing by any means, but it's new to me because I just started doing it. And I will share a recipe that I use. It's a recipe that you can use and kind of modify depending on different things you want to add to it. But I've really enjoyed this because 1, it tastes good and it's pretty filling, of course, when you add things to it. It has a good amount of protein and it's easy and quick. So someone said, I will buy a few things for my refrigerator at work. Yes. So keeping things at work is such a good idea. Especially snacks, even lunches, you can keep there, whether it's like frozen Amy's meal or something, things that you can throw together. That's such a good idea. Having things on hand is so helpful. Okay. So scenario 2 is eating at a restaurant or ordering takeout. So first thing, it says choosing nutrient dense foods that still taste good, right? So sometimes that's not always possible. It depends where we go. But we want to focus on what we can add, not eliminate. Okay. So says whenever we do choose to go out, we want to make sure that it's something that we enjoy, right? So there's always, or oftentimes there's that section of like healthier items or low calorie items. And if one of those sounds good and it's going to satisfy you, great. But if you're just getting that item because it's low calorie and it's going to taste horrible, then you're not going to be satisfied and you're probably going to be snacky when you get home. So first things first is trying to make sure that something sounds good. But then also maybe we can, one of the bullet points on the right there is adding a side salad, or maybe adding some veggies if you can, or maybe a side of fruit, right? So instead of thinking about what you can eliminate or what you can't have, think about what you can add to make it a little bit more nutrient dense. The most important part is the first bullet point on the right, is listening to your body. So some of the things that we talked about last week with mindful eating is when we go out to eat, sometimes there are bigger portions, right? So it's extra important to understand where you're at on the hunger scale, and then try to get to that comfortably full feeling on the fullness scale. And then if you have leftovers, box it up and have it when you feel that physical hunger again, and it'll be more satisfying, which is hard. Sometimes it takes a minute to adjust to, get comfortable with leaving things on the plate and taking it home. And so that's kind of a practice. It takes practice of doing that. So, yeah, sorry, that's my dog. So practicing doing that and getting comfortable with that. So first, but remember, what we have to do first is we have to, make sure that we're not super duper hungry before that meal, right? So that last bullet point on the right, it says, make sure to eat normally every 3 to 4 hours prior to eating out. So, we want to make sure that we are not super duper hungry before we eat out. Any questions on the second scenario with restaurant or takeout? Or just maybe like challenges that you want to share when you go out to eat? What do you think?
For me, my challenge, I love Italian food.
Same.
So my challenge is like, try not to eat the bread a lot that comes first, and then because there is then the bread, the pasta, those kind of things.
Right. Right. So that's a big one. I think that's common with the Italian restaurants because of the bread, and also the Mexican restaurants with the chips and salsa, right? That's always a big challenge.
Yes.
And trying to think, sometimes you have to think, do I want to fill up on the bread or the chips and salsa, or do I want to eat a couple so where I still have room for that meal? So it doesn't mean you can't eat any of the bread or you can't eat any of the chips or salsa, but really most of the time we're most excited for the meal, right? And again, you can, if you do end up filling up on the bread or the chips and salsa, then take some of your meal home. So when you do feel hungry again, you can have it. So it's not like you're depriving yourself of that specific food. But this is something that it takes practice again, and something that we can be mindful of. Also, I want to point out is the goal is to eat out less, right? And so when we do eat out, we want to enjoy it, right? We want to make sure that it sounds good, and that it's something, that we don't want to completely deprive ourselves in that moment, if that makes sense. So does anyone else relate with this, with like the bread or the chips and salsa? I think I got one yes that agrees with you. Anyone else feel that same concern? Or maybe a different challenge too. Chips and queso. I hear ya. Chips and guac, chips and queso. That's a hard one. Fast food dilemma. So whoever said that, do you want to kind of elaborate on that a little bit? Like with what specifically that dilemma is? Maybe it's like it's easy and it's convenient, and so you stop there a lot. What do you think?
Yes, this is Sherry. I mean, if you are just wanting something really quick and nobody wants to cook, it's like if somebody says, "Oh, let's go to Taco Bell or go to Chick-fil-A," it's like really mindful eating. I'm not really big on salads, but
Yeah.
just taking off the bread off, maybe the sandwich. I mean, there's just, what do you do? There's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
choices,
Yeah. Totally. That's a good, I think a lot of people can relate to that, right? Like we like the convenience of fast food, right? I mean, I think that's one of the positives of it. And to your salad point, you don't have to like salads to be healthy, right? There's several other foods that are great. But it does a lot of times when there are like the healthier items on the menu, they are salads. And so that is challenging. One thing that I've talked about in previous sessions is redefining fast food at home. And so for those nights that you just don't feel like cooking, what could we keep on hand that is quick and it's easy that maybe you don't feel as inclined to grabbing fast food? You're like, oh, we can throw a pizza in the oven and add like some microwave veggies on the side, right? Or some fruit even. So keeping things that sound good. I think people a lot of times will keep easy things that are like really super healthy and that they don't sound good. And then that's even more drive to get something out, but keep things on hand that sound good, right? Whether it's like frozen pasta of some ravioli or some sort, or like I said, the pizza, or sometimes mac and cheese, right? Like mac and cheese can be super easy if you add veggies in there or like some kind of protein, so trying to keep some of those things on hand to redefine quick, easy meals can also be helpful to kind of decrease the drive to go through the drive-through. So if that kind of makes sense or that helps, but I think that's a common challenge there. Thank you for sharing. Okay, one more chat. Mac and cheese. Yes, love it. Mac and cheese can be balanced. It has some protein in there, it has some fat, has some pasta, and it's something easy we can add some veggies to, right? Or just on the side, you don't have to add them to them, but. Okay, scenario 3 is social events. So big thing here that I talk about is food offers a lot more than just physical fuel, right? There's so much more to eating sometimes, right? Especially connection. A lot of times we connect and make memories over food, and even the specific food can be a memory, right? And so we want to be able to still have these experiences because that's what makes us sustainable. If we try to avoid things, that's not good mentally, and then we give up, right? So we want to still be present at social events. So the first bullet point on the right says, do not save calories. I hear this a lot, that they're going to eat really good before the event, quote good, or they're going to not eat even until the event. And then what happens when they get to the event? They're starving, right? And then what happens? They usually overeat. Then they're uncomfortable. Then it's hard to enjoy the event, right? And so the biggest thing is eating normally up until that event. So every 3 to 4 hours, eating those meals that include at least 3 food groups with protein and some fiber. So then by that event, you're not super duper hungry, you're just moderately hungry. And then you're able to think more about what sounds good and what's going to satisfy you. And then you're more present and you have more ability to enjoy that event. And then if it is a potluck kind of event, maybe you bring more of that healthy dish. So something's there that you can fill half of your plate with, right? And again, healthy doesn't have to taste bad. Maybe it's like a yummy vegetable or pasta salad even. So anything kind of resonate here. I also like the third bullet point of look at what's there, right? Before like immediately reacting and grabbing something, look at what's there. Think about what's going to satisfy you and what sounds really good, and then taste a little bit of those different things, right? So you can still enjoy the food without feeling uncomfortable. So what are some thoughts here with social events? Oh, someone said for easy meals, grilled cheese, quesadillas, tomato soup. Love that idea. That's an easy, quick, balanced meal. Thank you for that idea. So for social events, anything resonate here or that you relate to or that you've noticed? Birthday cake. Yeah. So desserts at events. First of all, if it sounds good to you, get it, right? Again, if you try to eliminate it or try to deprive yourself of it, you're going to have a need that isn't filled. Mental deprivation and physical deprivation have very similar consequences. Oftentimes, it'll result in some sort of overeating or binge. And that's what we want to prevent, right? Again, maybe you don't eat the entire piece of cake, right? Maybe you eat a few bites really mindfully and you notice that you're satisfied. Or honestly, now let me say two things. The more that you make peace with food, the more that you don't feel like you have to have a dessert every time it's present. However, sometimes, we like dessert. So that might mean that it looks good and you want to have a little bit, right? I think I've also said this to you guys, but sometimes it's helpful to serve it with your meal. And so then you're not finishing your meal and then feel full and then having a dessert too, right? That can be uncomfortable. Oops, okay. Okay. Any other thoughts here with events? Good comments, good questions. Okay. So scenario 4 is travel. So this can be a hard one. Again, our number one goal is to be present, enjoy your vacation, right? Again, not something we do all the time, so we want to really experience it. But there are certain things that we can plan for and be prepared for. One thing is bringing snacks if we're able to, right? If that's a road trip or, whatever it is. So certain things like dried fruit or nuts, bars. And you can see right here on bars, I do give a little bit of guidance as far as added sugar and fiber. So we want to try to stay around 7 grams or less of added sugar. If it's a little bit more, that's okay. But we want to try to stay around that number and at least 3 grams of fiber. Okay, because this will keep you feeling satisfied longer. Okay, so that's kind of a guideline when you look at the label. So yeah, so I'm going to give in a second, I'm going to give some airport snack ideas. But anything that you guys notice when traveling that help you, or again, maybe challenges here. I'll actually go to the next slide just so you can see them. Anyone want to share travel advice or travel challenges? Okay, well then we will talk about some of the airport snacks. I just wanted to give you a few ideas. One of our dietitians posted something about airport snacks, so I wanted to share this with you guys. Things that they have there. So I like this one, the avocado. It's like little toast that you can kind of dip into the avocado. Again, you have some carbohydrate there, you have some fat from the avocado, which will help you feel satisfied longer. Getting a little Baby Bell cheese so that'll give you some of that protein. And then you can do that with popcorn, like the popcorn over here. Getting a yogurt, they usually have some yogurt or some kind of fruit, pistachios, trail mix. There's another thing that I should have put on here that I completely forgot. I like they kind of look like adult Lunchables at the airport, basically. I think they're made by, is it Hillshire Farms? I'm not completely sure, but it's like salami and cheese and crackers, and I find it's not best for your breath, but it is good for feeling satisfied and taste. So I like getting those at the airport too. And then another one is the Core Power Fairlife shake. Usually they have there, so that's something you can grab and feel pretty satisfied for that flight. So here's some few ideas. Okay, so any questions, discussion? I think let's do, since we talked about goal setting specifically today, off of this presentation or just previous presentations, I would like for a couple of you to share some goals that you plan on working on over the next week or so. You guys have shared a couple with me already, but if you haven't, I'd love for you to share just because it gives the group some ideas. So go ahead and anyone would like to share some things that they want to work on.
Well, I was going to say, probably that's just for me, but I don't know why I cannot access any of the information you said. Like I tried to log in and I can't. So even the papers you said, like you have been saying for us to access, I cannot access. Or when you send me any information, anything, I cannot access to anything.
Weird. Okay, I will check into that. I wrote it down. I'll check into that. So, and I'll message you separately. Okay. Is anyone else having this issue?
So like when you message me, I cannot see it.
Okay. Bad.
I get a lot of messages that I got a message from you, but I cannot read it.
Oh no. Okay. I will look into this and we'll get it fixed. Yes, I will. I'll make sure to fix that over the next 1 to 2 days for you. Sorry about that. Thank you for letting me know. Any goals that you want to share? Let me see, chat. Workout before work. Yeah, I would like to exercise every day this week. And, again, I don't know how often you exercise, but maybe you want to start with like 4 days a week, right? Or 3 days. So just know that that's there to start first. Someone did say the school web browser blocks some of your content. So do you mean it blocks some of the things that I send that you can't open on your work computer?
Yes, it blocks a lot of what you guys send. So because you're an unknown source and because you have a chat ability, teachers have the same blocking that students have. So it's like we're kindergartners. So
Gotcha. Okay. Let me
Yeah.
message Jen on this and see what we can do. See if I can fix it. If not, it might just be something you have to do on your personal computer, but I will reach out and I'll investigate and do some exploring. Thanks for that information. So this last goal that we will share, it says making the dinner meal the night before. Someone said they made chicken lemon orzo soup, one of my favorites. The lemon in the soup is just to die for. I love it. The soup was ready to go. It made it easy. I love it. Yes. So making dinners the night before, such a good idea. Very good. Thanks for sharing. Something that so this page here is our some resources and our social media. So if you haven't followed us on social media, go ahead and do that. We also on our website have a really good blog with different articles and different recipes on there. So that's something to check out. We are officially halfway through this program. So what that means is I am going to send a sheet through Healthy for all of you guys to write a couple goals down and just kind of a general check-in for you to send to me, and then I will give feedback to all of you guys. So it is, it's not required by any means. You don't have to send it back to me. You can just keep it for yourself to kind of, hold yourself accountable. But if you would like to send it back to me, I can give feedback to you guys as we move forward. So next week we are going over, it's a fun one. I go through common nutrition myths and we talk about the facts versus certain common myths that you might see. So we're going to go over that. And then I think that's it for today. Any other questions, concerns, thoughts, feelings before I let you guys go? One more chat. Let's see. Thank you. Okay. Well, thanks for everyone for showing up and having such great conversation tonight. And I will see you guys next week. Have a good week. Bye, everyone.